Off the coast of Antarctica, deep underwater, researchers have discovered the British ship called Endurance, the vessel that launched one of the most remarkable stories of survival and determination.
Under the icy waters of the Antarctic, an underwater AI robot made a discovery no one believed was possible. It found Ernest Shackleton's legendary ship, Endurance, lost for over a century. But as the cameras rolled through the darkness, something else appeared. Something that terrified the entire research team. What the AI captured inside that wreck has left scientists on edge. Now, experts are trying to understand what really happened in those final moments. Join us as we reveal the shocking footage of the floorboards that were never meant to be seen. A story of endurance. It all began in one of the harshest places on Earth, the white world of Antarctica, where the air froze every breath and the sea moved like dark glass under the ice. More than a century ago, a man named Ernest Shackleton led an expedition there with a dream that few had dared before him. He wanted to cross the frozen continent from coast to coast. It was 1914, and the world was on the edge of war. Yet Shackleton and his crew sailed south aboard a wooden ship named Endurance, believing they could conquer the last unbroken frontier. The ship was strong, built for thick ice, and its name spoke of courage. Shackleton told his men to believe in the possibility as they watched the ice close around them. The journey started with hope, but nature had other plans. As the months passed, the cold increased, and the sea began to trap the ship in its grip. Day after day, the ice crept higher along the hull, and soon the Endurance could no longer move. The engines stopped. The crew could hear the wood moaning under the pressure of the frozen sea. The men watched cracks form in the deck as if the ice itself wanted to crush them. By October 1915, the Endurance was lost to the deep. Shackleton ordered the crew to abandon ship. They took what they could: tents, food, lifeboats, and set up camp on the ice itself. They were now prisoners of the Antarctic. The sound of breaking ice became their only companion. In the far distance, their ship disappeared under the frozen sea. The world thought they were gone. But Shackleton refused to give up. He told his men that it was either they lived or ended life together. For months, they drifted on shifting ice, trying to find open water. When the ice broke apart, they launched their small boats into strong waves. They fought freezing winds, hunger, and exhaustion. Somehow, against every law of nature, all 28 men survived. Shackleton's leadership turned tragedy into legend. However, the ship that had carried them, the Endurance, was never seen again. For more than 100 years, her fate remained sealed underneath the Antarctic ice. The last known coordinates were written in Shackleton's logbook, but the ice sheet moved constantly, changing the sea below it. Many explorers tried to find her resting place. They sent ships and cameras, but all came back empty. The conditions were too harsh. Temperatures that broke metal, waters too deep for divers, and ice that could crush a vessel in minutes. Scientists called it the impossible search. Still, the mystery refused to fade. The Endurance had become a symbol of human strength, a story passed down through generations of explorers. Even after so many failed searches in the 1980s, somewhere down there, she's waiting. Decades went by, and technology began to catch up with the dream. New tools were built, robots that could go deeper than any diver, drones that could map the seafloor through thick ice, and satellites that could read movement in the frozen crust above. Every few years, a new team announced plans to look again, but Antarctica kept her secret. The sea ice in the Weddell Sea is among the thickest on Earth. Ships that entered risked being trapped, just like Shackleton's. Winds howled at over 80 miles per hour, and temperatures dropped below -40. To lose power, there was to vanish forever. Yet curiosity kept calling people back. It was more than a shipwreck they were looking for. It was a piece of history frozen in time. In early 2022, more than a century after Endurance went down, a new generation of explorers prepared for another attempt, led by a marine engineer named Menson Bound. They had studied every record, every map, every journal written by Shackleton and his crew. Old logs, faded maps, and early satellite images had been analyzed by artificial intelligence. The data pointed them toward a specific patch of the Weddell Sea, a place covered in heavy pack ice that could crush a steel hull. The most valuable tool on board was a robotic submersible called the Sabertooth. It looked like a yellow torpedo with fins and cameras. It was built by Saab and could travel thousands of meters below the surface. Unlike earlier robots, this one could think for itself. It used AI to navigate through the darkness, avoid ice obstacles, and scan the seabed. Its sensors sent real-time images through fiber optic cables to monitors inside the control room. Each day, the crew watched the ice radar, waiting for narrow leads to open so they could release their underwater robot. The ship carrying the team sailed south through rough seas, crossing into the freezing circle of Antarctica. Icebergs surrounded them, rising like glass mountains. For days they pressed on, navigating through narrow leads of open water, waiting for the right moment to deploy the robot. The world watched their progress through satellite feeds and news updates. People who had read Shackleton's story as children now waited for news of the ship that had been lost for generations. The impossible search. The deeper they went into the Weddell Sea, the more the ice closed in around them. The weather changed without warning. Whiteouts, biting winds, and shifting ice flows that could crush steel. Each night, they gathered in the control room, studying sonar maps and planning the robot's descent. The AI machine was their eyes in the dark, their only hope of finding what the ocean had claimed. As the team prepared, the past and present seemed to blur. They read Shackleton's diary entries aloud. His words still carried the cold of that winter in 1915. The room fell silent as the engineers powered up the robot. It was time to send it below the ice, into waters no human had ever seen. No one knew what they would discover. Some believed the Endurance might have been torn apart by pressure. Others thought the ice would preserve it. Yet deep down, many hoped that they would find not just a wreck, but a story lost for over a century. The sea held its breath as the robot prepared to dive. And somewhere below, under miles of ice, the Endurance waited, ready to be found once more. As soon as the opportunity came, they lowered the machine into a hole cut through the ice. The robot slipped beneath the surface, lights glowing in the black water. The screen showed nothing at first, only the murky shapes of drifting ice and swirls of sediment. Slowly, the outlines of the seafloor appeared. Every rock, every shadow, was mapped by sonar. The AI system compared those patterns to historical shipwreck models, searching for something unnatural. The remains of a ship abandoned for years. Hours passed. The control room was filled with soft beeping from monitors. The team watched the data scroll by. The robot moved methodically, sweeping back and forth in wide arcs. Sometimes it stopped to capture high-resolution images of the seabed. The AI noticed slight changes in texture that human eyes could miss. In this case, it was like having another brain under the ice. Each discovery brought a flicker of hope, but the sea remained silent. The conditions below were beyond extreme. The water temperature was almost -2 degrees Celsius, cold enough to freeze a diver in minutes. The robot's body was reinforced with titanium and thick insulation to survive the pressure 3,000 meters deep. If anything went wrong, there would be no rescue. The AI was built to return on its own if its signal was lost. That independence made it both powerful and scary, a machine exploring a place no human could ever reach. Above the ice, the crew worked in layers of heavy gear. The wind howled across the deck, carrying crystals of snow that stung their faces. Visibility often dropped to zero. When storms came, they had to halt all operations and wait inside the ship for days. The pressure of the ice against the hull made deep rumbling sounds that kept everyone awake at night. It felt like the ocean was breathing. But each time the weather cleared, they returned to their instruments. The mission combined skill, patience, and luck. Every dive of the robot covered a new section of seafloor, building a 3D map of the hidden world below. The sonar system produced ghostly outlines that grew clearer with each scan. Most areas showed only natural ridges and sand. Still, the AI kept running pattern checks, comparing shapes with thousands of ship blueprints. The slightest sign of wood or metal was flagged instantly. Each time it did, the crew rushed to the monitors, hoping to see the first glimpse of the Endurance. They were not alone in the field of discovery. A second robot acted as backup, ready to be sent if the first one failed. Drones hovered above, taking measurements of ice thickness and sea temperature. Satellites transmitted the data back to headquarters in real time. It was a combination of human ability and digital precision. Shackleton himself would have admired it, but technology could not erase the danger. Ice moved constantly, pushing against their ship, sometimes blocking their escape route. After days of scanning, the AI began detecting unusual shapes deep below. The sonar showed linear patterns too, even to be natural. The robot turned its cameras toward the signal and moved closer. The feed that came back showed dark outlines half buried in silt. The engineers enhanced the image and held their breath. It wasn't yet clear what they were seeing, only the faint suggestion of something man-made. So, they marked the coordinates and pulled the robot up for maintenance. The next morning, they launched the Sabertooth again. It dived straight for the marked spot, guided by AI navigation that could pinpoint an object within inches. The robot's lights pierced the darkness as it descended through layers of icy water. The sonar pinged again, louder this time. A large structure was appearing on the map, stretching nearly 40 meters long. The AI recognized its symmetry instantly. It sent a message to the control room. Possible vessel detected. No one spoke for several seconds. They watched as the robot moved along the outline, recording every angle. The data streamed back in real time, and the AI kept processing, building a detailed model of the object below. The excitement spread across the deck. After weeks of waiting, they might be standing on the edge of history. Yet they all knew it was only the beginning. The technology had found something large, hidden, and surprisingly intact, resting in the black cold under the ice. Discovery of the wreck. When the first clear image appeared on the screen, the room fell into stunned silence. The camera feed from the AI robot showed a long, shadowy form rising out of the dark water, covered in thin layers of frost and sediment. The ship's outline was nearly perfect. The hull stood upright, the bow tilted slightly upward, as though it had frozen in motion while trying to climb to the surface. The team stared, unable to look away. The ship had been gone for over 100 years, but now it stood there as if time had slowed. On the stern, faint but clear, the name Endurance could still be read. The letters had survived the cold, untouched by the rot that would have destroyed them anywhere else. The icy water had preserved it all, sealing the ship in an underwater tomb that looked more like a dream than reality. The robot moved slowly around the wreck, its lights sweeping across the deck. Every movement revealed more detail: ropes, rails, and the broken wheel frozen in place. There were no human remains, only the empty shell of the vessel. The camera lingered on the ship's wheel, which still stood upright near the stern. It seemed to watch the approaching lens, as though someone invisible still guarded the vessel. The atmosphere in the control room shifted from excitement to awe. They had all expected fragments, perhaps a few shattered beams or scattered metal. Instead, the Endurance appeared almost whole. The ship had landed gently on the seabed, its bow pointing north, in nearly the same position recorded by Shackleton's notes. The AI processed every image, stitching them together into a full 3D model. The team decided to send the robot deeper into the wreck's shadow. Its lights revealed the ship's propeller. The rudder was in position, frozen mid-turn. Even the copper nails holding the planks together were visible. The scientists watched as the robot passed over the cargo deck and the mast stumps, where torn ropes still floated like strands of hair. Some parts were broken, crushed by ice long ago, but the overall structure had remained largely preserved. In that freezing darkness, the Endurance had become something between a wreck and a relic. The environment was deadly to humans, but perfect for preservation. The deep cold had slowed decay to almost nothing, and the absence of wood-eating organisms meant that the planks stayed strong. Every part of the ship seemed to whisper back stories of the men who had once stood there, their laughter, their fear, their final moments before the ice won. The Discovery team marked the coordinates carefully and began mapping the area around the wreck. The seabed was smooth and undisturbed, as if the ship had landed there softly and rested ever since. The AI robot scanned nearby for debris, anchors, barrels, fragments of the ship's rigging, and found small clusters scattered around the hull. The scientists compared every detail to the ship's original blueprints and Shackleton's records. Every match confirmed it. This was no mistake. They had found the real Endurance. The robot drifted past the captain's cabin. Through a broken section of the hull, they could see the shape of a chair still standing. Dust particles floated inside like snow. The camera paused there, capturing a still frame that would later travel around the world. But the deeper the robot went, the stranger the scene became. The silence was total. There were no fish, no crabs, no signs of movement. The deep Antarctic sea seemed lifeless, like a sealed vault. Some of the crew began to describe it as dark, even frightening. The stillness felt unnatural, as if time had been erased. For hours, they explored every section of the ship. They discovered that the front mast had collapsed inward, crushing part of the deck. The stern, however, remained pristine. The AI recorded symbols carved into the wood by the sailors, small initials, names, and rough sketches, the kind men make to pass long days at sea. Those carvings were now encased in frost, their lines clear under the robot's camera light. Each one was a voice from the past speaking through the cold. As the mission continued through the night, the glow from the monitors lit the faces of the team. They barely moved, their eyes fixed on the screen. The AI kept streaming images, the anchor chain, the broken wheelhouse, the scattered ropes frozen mid-curve. The robot's light faded in and out as it turned, revealing endurance in full form, resting proudly on the ocean floor. It had not disappeared or crumbled. It had endured, just as its name promised. Details and implications. The data from the robot poured in for hours, filling every screen on the ship. Thousands of images came together to form a complete picture of the wreck in remarkable clarity. When the 3D scans appeared for the first time, even the most experienced archaeologists were speechless. The Endurance stood there in perfect stillness, resting on the ocean floor 3,000 meters deep, her structure untouched by time. It looked less like a ruin and more like a ship frozen between two worlds, one of history, one of ice. The high-resolution scans revealed every plank, every nail, every mark left by the hands that had built her in 1912. The wood showed no sign of rot. The freezing water and lack of bacteria had preserved it all, turning the Endurance into a kind of natural museum. When the camera zoomed in, the details felt surreal. A compass still fixed to the deck, a handle on the wheel, and scattered bits of rope lying exactly where they had fallen a century ago. The footage showed more than beauty. It showed mystery. Inside the wreck, strange formations glimmered under the lights like frost blooming along the beams. They were mineral crystals formed by slow reactions between the salt water and the wood. They sparkled like glass in the darkness, making the interior look unreal. The deeper the robot moved, the more otherworldly it seemed. Staring at the screen, it didn't look like Earth. The deeper layers of ice above created a constant shadow, giving the water a green-black hue that swallowed all light. Marine biologists on board noticed something else: the total absence of aquatic life. No fish swam near the wreck, no shrimp or crabs moved along the planks. In most shipwrecks, marine creatures quickly take over. Here, there was nothing. The stillness was disturbing. It was as if the Endurance lay in a zone untouched by life. The scientists suggested that extreme cold and pressure made it impossible for most organisms to survive there. Others quietly said the place simply felt wrong. The AI scans also revealed the interior spaces, mapping out cabins and storage areas. The captain's quarters were surprisingly clear. A small table remained upright, and next to it a metal cup rested on its side. Wooden drawers still sat closed. The robot's cameras also captured what looked like a writing desk in one of the cabins. The outline of a notebook was visible under a thin layer of silt, but the team decided not to move closer. The mission's rule was to observe, never to disturb. They wanted to preserve everything exactly as they found it. As the scans continued, researchers realized how much information could be learned from the wreck. Every angle, every crack, told a story about how the ship went down. The twisted beams near the midsection revealed where the ice had crushed the hull. The stern's angle showed how the ship had been lifted by the pressure before sinking. The measurements helped scientists reconstruct the exact sequence of events, from the moment the ice trapped her to her final descent. The data would help rewrite one of the most famous stories in exploration history. Engineers began building full 3D models of the ship for future study. Using millions of data points collected by the AI, they could recreate the Endurance in digital space down to the smallest detail. It allowed historians to step virtually inside the cabins and see what Shackleton's men once saw. The technology had done more than find the ship. It had resurrected her. Viewers around the world could now explore the lost vessel in exact form, a century after she vanished beneath the ice. However, the more they analyzed the images, the more eerie the discovery became. The wreck seemed to stare back. The shadows created by the robot's lights gave the impression of figures standing on deck, frozen mid-action. A coil of rope looked like an arm. A broken mast resembled a man leaning forward. The researchers knew it was an illusion, but they couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Outside, the temperature dropped to record lows. The sea ice thickened around the expedition ship, forcing the crew to move quickly. They knew they might only get one full day of scanning before conditions became too dangerous. They worked non-stop, checking cables, adjusting lights, sending new coordinates to the AI. Everyone moved with quiet urgency. No one wanted to lose contact with the robot, not when it had finally shown them the face of a legend. By midnight, the data storage was full. They had captured every inch of the Endurance, from her broken bow to her standing rudder. The last images were breathtaking. The ship resting peacefully in the dark, her mast fallen across the deck, her name gleaming in faint light. The robot slowly turned away, recording the entire vessel one final time before beginning its ascent. As it rose, the cameras caught the final view of the wreck, shrinking into the black water like a fading memory. Back on the surface, the ship's crew gathered around the monitors in silence. They had seen something few people on Earth ever would: the remains of a vessel that had defied decay and time. The sea had hidden it for over a century, and now, through the eyes of a machine, humanity was seeing it again. For a long while, no one spoke. The discovery was too much, too haunting to describe. They knew they had found more than a shipwreck. They had witnessed a story carved into the depths of a world that had waited in darkness for generations. The future of explorations. The discovery of the Endurance had shaken the world of exploration, yet for the team who found her, the meaning went far deeper than the headlines. What they had seen was not just a shipwreck. It was a frozen echo of human endurance. The scientists didn't cheer. They just sat there, overwhelmed, knowing they had looked into the face of history. The Endurance had been found, yet the feeling that stayed with them was not triumph, but something else. The quiet terror of realizing how time, ice, and memory could hold on forever. When the robot completed its final scan and returned to the surface, the crew gathered in the control room. The monitors glowed with the last captured frames of the wreck as the robot rose slowly back to the surface, leaving behind the ghostly ship in darkness once more. No one spoke for several minutes. They had all worked years for this moment, and now that it had arrived, the feeling was not triumph, but something heavier, reverence mixed with disbelief. The engineers saved the final sequence of images and began to shut down the system. The hum of the computers slowly ended. Outside, as they looked out toward the endless stretch of white, the wind swept across the deck, pushing snow against the metal doors. The reality of what they had uncovered began to sink in. They had looked straight into a chapter that had been closed for more than a century, and the ocean had allowed them an opportunity before closing again. The AI data began its long journey back to the mainland. The files were transmitted through satellites moving slowly through the Antarctic night. As the information reached labs and museums around the world, experts began piecing together the new knowledge it offered. They studied the digital model of the ship, the texture of the wood, the condition of every beam. Each image was a window into the past, carrying clues about how Shackleton's ship had lived and died. But for those who had stood there in the frozen sea, the technical details mattered less than the emotion of that sight. They had watched a ghost rise from the deep, a symbol of courage that had outlived the men who built it. The mission had been built on technology, artificial intelligence, sonar, and robotics. Yet the feeling it created was entirely human: wonder, fear, and respect for what endured when everything else was gone. In the following days, storms rolled across the Weddell Sea. The temperature dropped sharply, and the pressure of the ice began to close around the expedition ship. The crew prepared to leave, knowing they might not return for years. They packed the instruments carefully, sealed the data drives, and took one last look at the frozen horizon. Somewhere under them, Endurance rested again in darkness. Nothing they had done had disturbed her peace. They had come, seen, and left her untouched, as Shackleton might have wanted. When the expedition reached open water, they finally allowed themselves to feel the weight of what had happened. The world would soon know the details, the coordinates, the scans, the photographs, but what could never be shared was the feeling of being there. They had stared into a silence so deep that even machines seemed to hesitate. The sea wasn't showing them what it held. It was letting them borrow a secret. Back in their home countries, scientists, historians, and students gathered to study the findings. Schools displayed the digital model of the Endurance in classrooms. Children who had read about Shackleton's story could now walk virtually through the same ship their ancestors had dreamed about. The discovery reignited interest in Antarctic exploration and the courage of those who once risked everything for discovery. The wreck was no longer just a legend in books. It had become a living image that reached across generations. For the researchers, the experience left deeper questions. What other stories still slept under the ice? What else waited in oceans where humans could not go? The success of the AI mission proved that machines could explore where humans could not survive. It opened the door to a new age of discovery, one where artificial minds could travel to the most unreachable corners of the planet and bring back forgotten truths. Yet even as the scientists celebrated that progress, they felt bothered about what that none of the data could explain. As days turned into weeks, the ship carrying the team left Antarctic waters. The ice disappeared behind them, but the memory did not. At night, many of them replayed the video feeds, unable to stop watching. The glow of the robot's light moving across the wooden planks felt like a heartbeat in the dark. Each time they saw the name Endurance appear on screen, it carried a new meaning, not just for Shackleton's men, but for everyone who had ever dared to go beyond what seemed possible. In the following months, exhibitions around the world displayed the digital reconstruction. Crowds stood before massive screens showing the wreck in motion, turning slowly in cold blue light. People whispered as they watched, not out of fear, but out of respect. The ship seemed alive even on screen, her beams glowing softly, her form unbroken. The AI's discovery had given the world a mirror, a reflection of human strength and fragility lying together on the ocean floor. Do you think there could be more hidden beneath the icy waters of Antarctica? Let us know your views in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe to this channel. Before you go, watch the other videos on your screen.